The Galactic Concord had existed for 12,000 years, and in all that time, its members believed they had seen everything the universe could offer. They had witnessed the rise and fall of empires that spanned hundreds of star systems. They had cataloged over 800 spacefaring species, from the ancient and wise Etherians to the savage but predictable Kethvoran warriors. They had created laws that governed trillions of beings across countless worlds. The Concord was old, powerful, and absolutely certain of its place in the cosmos. So when a small blue planet in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy suddenly broadcast signals into space, the Concord paid little attention. Another primitive species had discovered radio waves. How quaint. How utterly unremarkable. Ambassador Lyris Venn remembered the day she received her assignment to handle humanity's integration into galactic society. She was a Volanthi, a species known for their purple skin, forearms, and exceptional diplomatic skills. She had spent 300 years managing difficult species, and she considered herself an expert in understanding alien minds. Humans, her superior had said with a dismissive wave of his tentacles, are a Tier 7 classification. Short-lived, fragile, confined to a single planet. They pose no threat and offer no significant value. Your job is simply to keep them quiet and ensure they cause no problems. Lyris had accepted the assignment without complaint. A Tier 7 species meant easy work and little stress. She would spend a few decades teaching these primitives the basics of galactic law, help them establish a small colony or two on the fringe territories, and then move on to more important matters. Her first meeting with the human delegation changed everything she thought she knew. The humans arrived on the Concord's diplomatic station in a ship that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts and desperate hope. Their ambassador was a woman named Elena Vasquez, who stood barely 5 feet tall and smiled constantly. Lyris towered over her by 3 feet, yet somehow felt as if she was the smaller one in the room. "We are honored to meet our galactic neighbors," Elena had said, her voice warm and genuine. Earth has dreamed of this moment for centuries. Lyris had delivered the standard speech about galactic law, territory rights, and the expectations placed upon new species. She explained that humans would be given a small region on the galactic fringe, far from the major trade routes and political centers. She made it clear that humanity was expected to remain humble, grateful, and most importantly, quiet. Elena listened to everything with that strange smile on her face. When Lyris finished, the human ambassador simply nodded and said, "We understand perfectly. Thank you for your guidance." That should have been the end of it. New species always reacted the same way when they learned their place in the galactic hierarchy. Some grew angry, some grew sad, and some simply accepted their fate. But humans did something Lyris had never encountered before. They agreed to everything while their eyes said something completely different. Over the following months, Lyris observed a human delegation with growing confusion. They never complained about their assigned territories, never demanded better treatment, never challenged the decisions of the Concord. They were polite, cooperative, and seemingly content with their low status. But she noticed things that troubled her. The humans asked questions constantly. They wanted to know about every species, every technology, every historical conflict. They recorded everything, analyzed everything, and remembered everything. Their scientists studied galactic databases with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Their military officers attended every public demonstration of alien weaponry with keen interest. Why did they watch so carefully? Lyris asked her assistant one evening. "They are Tier 7. They cannot possibly hope to match the technology of the elder races." Her assistant, a young Volanthi named Korath, had simply shrugged. "Perhaps they are just curious. Humans are strange creatures, Ambassador. They seem to find everything fascinating. Lyris was not convinced. She had dealt with curious species before, but this was different. When a Tier 7 species looked at advanced technology, they usually showed awe, fear, or envy. Humans showed something else entirely. They showed calculation. 30 years passed and humanity expanded to a dozen colony worlds on the galactic fringe. They built cities, established trade routes, and developed their own modest fleet of starships. By galactic standards, they remained utterly insignificant. The great powers of the Concord barely remembered they existed. Lyris requested to remain as humanity's liaison, a decision that puzzled her superiors. Why would a senior ambassador waste her career on such a minor species? She could not explain her reasoning, only that something about humans demanded her attention. She attended the opening ceremony of New Helsinki, humanity's largest colony world. The planet was beautiful, covered in vast forests and crystal-clear lakes. The colonists had built their cities to blend with nature rather than dominate it. Children played in parks while their parents worked to build a new civilization. Admiral Helena Cross gave the dedication speech. She was an older woman with silver hair and eyes that seemed to see through everything. Lyris had met her several times and found her deeply unsettling. Most military officers spoke of defense and protection, but Admiral Cross spoke of something else. This world represents everything humanity stands for, the Admiral said to the crowd. We came from a planet that tried to kill us with ice ages, plagues, and disasters beyond counting. We survived because we refused to surrender. We survived because every time the universe knocked us down, we got back up and punched it in the face. The crowd laughed and cheered. Lyris did not laugh. She heard something beneath the Admiral's words, something that sent a chill down her spine. She heard a warning. That night, Lyris sent a message to the Concord's Security Council. She recommended that humanity be reclassified and monitored more closely. She argued that the humans were hiding something, preparing for something, building towards something that no one could see. The council rejected her concerns. Humans were Tier 7, they reminded her. Fragile, primitive, and incapable of posing any real threat. Her fears were unfounded and possibly embarrassing. Lyris accepted their decision, but she did not change her opinion. She had spent 30 years among humans, and she had learned one crucial truth about them. They were patient. They could smile while plotting, agree while resisting, and bow while preparing to strike. They had accepted their place at the bottom of the galactic hierarchy without complaint, and that should have terrified everyone, because humans never did anything without a reason. And Lyris Venn, alone among all the species of the Galactic Concord, understood that humanity was not waiting for their chance to rise. They were waiting for someone to make a terrible mistake. The Kethvoran Dominion had conquered 17 star systems through violence, fear, and absolute brutality. Their warriors stood 9 feet tall, covered in natural armor plating that could stop most energy weapons. Their claws could tear through steel, and their 4 eyes could see in complete darkness. For 3,000 years, they had been the terror of the galactic fringe, and no species had ever successfully resisted them. Supreme Warlord Malachar ruled the Dominion with an iron fist. He had personally killed over 2,000 enemies in combat and had ordered the deaths of millions more. His throne was made from the bones of conquered kings, and his palace walls were decorated with the flags of destroyed civilizations. He feared nothing and respected no one. When his scouts reported human colony ships passing near Dominion territory, Malachar saw an opportunity. These humans were Tier 7, weak and soft and utterly defenseless. They would make excellent slaves, and their conquest would add another trophy to his collection. He summoned his war council and announced his intentions. The humans have grown comfortable in their little corner of space, he growled, his voice like grinding rocks. They have forgotten that the galaxy belongs to the strong. It is time to remind them. His generals roared their approval. The thought of fresh conquest excited them, and the humans would offer him no real challenge. It would be quick, easy, and profitable. Malachar sent his ultimatum to Earth's United Council with the confidence of a predator addressing prey. His demands were simple but devastating. Humanity would surrender 3 of their colony worlds immediately. They would provide 50,000 humans as labor tribute to serve in Dominion mines and factories. And most importantly, they would broadcast a public statement of submission to the entire galaxy, kneeling before the Dominion and acknowledging their inferiority. The alternative was extinction. Ambassador Lyris Ven received word of the ultimatum while stationed on Earth. Her blood ran cold as she read the Dominion's demands. She had seen what the Kethvaran did to species that resisted them. Entire civilizations had been wiped from existence, their worlds burned to ash and their people slaughtered down to the last child. She rushed to the United Council chambers to plead for compliance. "You must understand," she begged the assembled human leaders. "The Kethvaran are not making empty threats. They have destroyed dozens of species far more powerful than yours. If you refuse them, they will kill everyone. Every man, every woman, every child on every human world." The council listened to her words in silence. Their faces showed no fear, no panic, no desperation. They simply listened with the same calm attention they gave to every diplomatic matter. Admiral Helena Cross sat at the end of the table, her silver hair gleaming under the chamber lights. She had not spoken since the meeting began, but her presence dominated the room. Every council member glanced at her before speaking, as if seeking her approval. "Ambassador Ven," said President Chun, a tall man with kind eyes and a gentle voice, "we appreciate your concern for our safety. The Concord has always shown us great consideration." He paused and looked around the table at his colleagues. "However, we must discuss this matter among ourselves before making any decision." Lyris felt a spark of hope. Perhaps they would see reason. Perhaps they would choose survival over pride. The council debated for 6 hours while Lyris waited outside the chamber. She paced the corridor, her 4 hands clasped behind her back, her mind racing through every possible outcome. If the humans refused the ultimatum, the Kethvaran would attack within days. The human fleet was small and untested, their weapons primitive by galactic standards. They would be massacred. When the chamber doors finally opened, Admiral Cross emerged first. Her face was calm, almost peaceful, but her eyes burned with something Lyris could not identify. Behind her came the other council members, all wearing the same strange expression. "Ambassador Ven," Admiral Cross said, her voice steady and cold, "we have reached our decision. Please transmit our response to the Dominion." Lyris activated her recording device with trembling hands. "What message shall I send?" Admiral Cross smiled, and for the first time, Lyris understood why humans showed their teeth when they smiled. It was not a gesture of friendliness. It was a warning. "Tell Supreme Warlord Malachar that humanity respectfully declines his generous offer," the Admiral said. "Tell him that our colony worlds are not for sale, our people are not for slavery, and our knees do not bend to tyrants." She paused, and her smile grew wider. "Tell him to come and take them." Lyris stared at the Admiral in disbelief. "You cannot be serious? This is suicide. The Kethvaran will destroy you." "Perhaps," Admiral Cross replied. "But they will know they were in a fight, and the galaxy will learn something important about humanity. What could possibly be worth the death of your entire species?" Admiral Cross placed a hand on the ambassador's shoulder, and her touch was surprisingly gentle. "Freedom, Ambassador. Freedom is worth everything. We spent 10,000 years learning that lesson, written in blood and fire across our history. Our ancestors faced extinction 100 times and never surrendered. Do you think we will start now? Lyris transmitted the message with shaking hands. She watched the Dominion's response arrive within the hour. A simple statement that promised destruction unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Warlord Malachar was furious, humiliated by the defiance of these primitive creatures. He would make humanity pay for their arrogance. The Concord's Security Council held an emergency session. They debated whether to intervene, whether to offer humanity sanctuary, whether to do anything at all. In the end, they decided to do nothing. The humans had chosen their fate, and interfering would only anger the Dominion further. They are Tier 7, the Council President declared. They cannot be saved, and we will not sacrifice Concord lives for a species that refuses to accept reality. Lyris returned to Earth with tears in her eyes. She expected to find chaos, panic, and despair. Instead, she found something that haunted her for the rest of her long life. She found humans preparing for war. Factories ran day and night, producing weapons and supplies. Scientists worked without sleep in laboratories across the planet. Soldiers trained with an intensity that bordered on madness. And everywhere she looked, Lyris saw the same expression on every human face. Not fear, not desperation, not even anger. Determination. Admiral Cross met her at the spaceport, surrounded by officers in crisp uniforms. Ambassador, I recommend you leave Earth immediately. What comes next will not be pleasant. Why are you doing this? Lyris asked. You know, you cannot win. The Admiral's smile returned, cold and fierce. Ambassador, you have watched us for 30 years, and you still do not understand. Humans do not fight because we know we can win. We fight because some things are worth fighting for, even if we lose. She turned to leave, then paused. Besides, who said anything about losing? Lyris watched her walk away and felt something she had never experienced in 300 years of diplomacy. She felt true fear. Not of the Kethvoran, but of what humanity was about to become. The Kethvoran armada descended upon New Helsinki like a storm of death and fire. 400 warships darkened the sky, each one bristling with weapons that could level cities in seconds. Supreme Warlord Malachar himself commanded the invasion from his flagship, eager to witness the destruction of these arrogant humans. He expected the colony to fall within hours. He expected the humans to flee in terror, to beg for mercy, to realize their terrible mistake. He expected another easy conquest to add to his collection of broken civilizations. He was wrong. New Helsinki had transformed. The beautiful cities were now fortresses, surrounded by walls of reinforced steel and defensive barriers. Every road had become a maze of obstacles and traps. Every building had been turned into a bunker. The colonists had spent every moment since the ultimatum preparing for this day, and they were ready to make the Dominion pay for every inch of ground. The orbital bombardment began at dawn. Kethvoran warships rained fire upon the planet, targeting military installations, power stations, and communication towers. Explosions lit up the sky as missiles found their marks. Smoke and ash filled the air, turning day into night. And still the humans did not break. They retreated into underground shelters that had been dug in secret. They emerged from hidden bunkers to strike at landing parties. They used every weapon, every trick, every ounce of courage to slow the Dominion's advance. Children carried ammunition through tunnels while their parents fired from windows. Elderly engineers built bombs from mining equipment and kitchen chemicals. Teachers became snipers, doctors became soldiers, and farmers became warriors. Warlord Malachar watched the resistance with growing frustration. His forces controlled the skies and had superior firepower in every engagement. By all measures of military logic, the humans should have surrendered after the first week. Instead, They fought harder with each passing day. "These creatures are insane," his general reported after a month of bloody combat. "They refuse to retreat even when surrounded. They attack our positions with weapons that cannot possibly penetrate our armor. They die by the thousands, and still they come." Malachar ordered more troops to the surface. He would crush this resistance through sheer numbers if necessary. 50,000 HFY warriors landed on New Helsinki, the largest ground invasion in Dominion history. They marched toward the human positions with absolute confidence, their armor gleaming in the firelight of a burning world. The humans were waiting for them. Major Sarah Chun commanded the defense of Sector 7, a residential district that had become a killing ground. She had lost half her soldiers in the first 2 months, but the survivors had become something more than soldiers. They had become hunters. "Remember your training," she told her troops as the HFY approached. "They are bigger, stronger, and better armored. But they are not smarter, and they are not more determined. We know this ground. We know every alley, every building, every hiding spot. Make them pay for every step." The battle for Sector 7 lasted 3 weeks. The humans fought from rooftops and basements, from sewer tunnels and collapsed buildings. They set traps that caught entire squads in crossfire. They launched night raids that left the HFY afraid to sleep. They proved that courage and cunning could overcome size and strength. A HFY commander named Frollock captured Major Chun during a raid on her command post. He dragged her before his soldiers, intending to execute her as an example to the other humans. Her armor was shattered, her body covered in wounds, and her left arm hung useless at her side. "Your resistance ends here," Frollock growled, raising his blade. "Beg for mercy, and I will make your death quick." Major Chun looked up at him with blood running down her face. Her eyes showed no fear, no desperation, no surrender. She smiled that terrible human smile and spat blood at his feet. "You have no idea what you have awakened," she whispered. "Every human you kill becomes a legend. Every atrocity you commit hardens our resolve. You think you are teaching us fear, but you are teaching us hatred. And humans are very good at hating." Frollock hesitated. There was something in her voice, something that made his warrior instinct scream a warning. Before he could strike, an explosion rocked the building. Human commandos had tracked their major and had come to rescue her. In the chaos, Major Chun grabbed a fallen blade and drove it through Frollock's throat. She collapsed from her wounds moments later, but her soldiers carried her to safety. She survived, and her story spread through the human ranks like wildfire. The siege entered its 3rd month. The HFY had expected victory in days, but now they were bleeding. Thousands of warriors lay dead in the streets of New Helsinki. Supply lines were constantly attacked by human guerrillas. Morale was collapsing as soldiers faced an enemy that simply would not die. Ambassador Lyris Venn watched the battle reports from a Concord observation station. She had expected to witness the end of humanity, but instead she watched something that changed her understanding of the universe. She watched a Tier 7 species hold back the most feared military force in the galaxy. How is this possible? She asked a Concord military analyst. The humans should have been destroyed weeks ago. The analyst visited the data with confusion in his eyes. "They are not fighting to win," he said slowly. "They are fighting to make the Dominion bleed. Every day the siege continues. The HFY lose resources, soldiers, and reputation. The humans are trading their lives for time, and no one understands why." Lyris understood. She had spent decades among humans, learning their strange ways. They were waiting for something, buying time with their blood and courage. They had a plan that no one could see. On the 96th day of the siege, Warlord Malachar received a transmission from his scouts on the edge of the system. Unknown ships had been detected, moving at speeds that should have been impossible. The fleet was not Concord, not Dominion, not any species in the galactic database. The ships were human, and they were coming. Malachar stared at the readings with growing horror. The human fleet was small, barely 300 vessels. But their energy signatures were off the scale, their weapon systems unknown, their tactical formations unlike anything he had ever seen. For the first time in his long life, Supreme Warlord Malachar felt the cold touch of fear. The humans had not been buying time for rescue. They had been buying time for revenge. No one in the Galactic Concord knew about Project Prometheus. For 30 years, while humanity smiled and accepted their place at the bottom of the galactic hierarchy, their greatest minds had been working in secret. Hidden laboratories on distant asteroids, research stations buried beneath lifeless moons, shipyards constructed in the dark spaces between stars. All of it invisible, all of it undetectable, all of it preparing for the day someone would try to enslave the human race. Admiral Helena Cross stood on the bridge of the UES Unconquered and watched New Helsinki grow larger on the viewscreen. The planet was burning, its cities reduced to rubble, its people fighting a desperate battle for survival. 3 months of siege had cost humanity dearly, but they had given her the time she needed. All ships report ready, her tactical officer announced. The fleet awaits your orders, Admiral. Cross studied the sensor readings with cold satisfaction. The Kethvoran armada was in disarray, scattered across the system in a loose formation. They had grown complacent during the siege, never expecting a real threat. They had no idea what was about to hit them. Signal all vessels, Cross commanded. Execute Operation Thunderstrike. The sky above New Helsinki turned white. On the surface, the defenders saw the flash and knew immediately what it meant. Major Sarah Chun, still recovering from her wounds, looked up from her hospital bed and felt tears streaming down her face. They came, she whispered. They actually came. The Kethvoran saw something impossible. Human ships materialized from faster-than-light travel in perfect synchronization, appearing in attack formation with weapons already charged. No species in galactic history had ever demonstrated such precise fleet coordination. It should not have been possible. But the ships themselves were even more terrifying. The human vessels were sleek and angular, designed for one purpose: war. Their hulls were covered in armor that sensors could not penetrate. Their weapon systems emitted energy signatures that no database could identify. And at the center of the formation was the flagship Unconquered, a dreadnought the size of a small moon. Warlord Malachar stared at the viewscreen in disbelief. What is this? The humans are Tier 7. They cannot possess such technology. His scientists had no answers. The human ships were operating on principles that defied known physics. Their engines were too powerful, their weapons too advanced, their tactics too sophisticated. Somewhere, somehow, humanity had leaped forward centuries in technological development without anyone noticing. All ships, attack formation. Malachar roared. Destroy them before they can organize. The Kethvoran armada responded with the speed and aggression that had made them feared across the galaxy. 400 warships turned toward the human fleet, weapons charging for a devastating first strike. They outnumbered the humans almost 2 to 1. They had firepower, experience, and the fury of a wounded predator. None of it mattered. The battle began when the Unconquered fired its main weapon. A beam of pure energy lanced across space and struck a Kethvoran battleship. The vessel did not explode. It simply ceased to exist, converted to atoms in an instant. One shot, one kill, no debris. Silence fell across the Dominion fleet. They had just witnessed the impossible. No weapon in galactic history could destroy a battleship with a single strike. The humans had developed something new, something terrifying, something that changed the rules of warfare forever. Admiral Cross did not give them time to recover. "All ships, weapons free. Show them what happens when you threaten humanity." The human fleet attacked with coordinated fury. Frigates moved in perfect formations, their weapons finding weak points in Kethvoran armor. Destroyers launched missiles but could not be intercepted. Cruisers provided covering fire while smaller ships darted through enemy lines. It was not a battle. It was a demonstration of absolute superiority. The Kethvoran fought back with everything they had. Their weapons hammered human ships, scoring hits that would have destroyed any other fleet. But human shields held, human armor endured. Human crews kept fighting no matter the damage. Every time a Dominion vessel was destroyed, 3 more fell in return. Warlord Malachar watched his armada die around him. Ships that had conquered civilizations were burning in the void. Warriors who had never known fear were screaming as their vessels were torn apart. The pride of the Dominion was being systematically erased from existence. "This cannot be happening," he whispered. "We are the Kethvoran. We have never lost." His flagship shuddered as human weapons found their mark. Alarms screamed throughout the vessel, warning of cascading failures. The mighty warship that had led 1,000 conquests was falling apart around him. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Kethvoran armada was debris. Scattered wreckage drifted through space, the remains of 400 warships that had expected an easy victory. The ground forces on New Helsinki, cut off from support, surrendered unconditionally. Warlord Malachar was captured alive, dragged from the ruins of his flagship in chains. Admiral Cross broadcast a message across every channel in the galaxy. Every species, every world, every being heard her words in perfect clarity. 30 years ago, humanity asked for nothing but peace. We accepted the lowest status in your hierarchy. We smiled when you called us primitive. We nodded when you dismissed us as insignificant. We asked only to be left alone. Our voice grew colder with each word. The Kethvoran answered our peace with chains. They demanded our submission, our servitude, our humanity. They threatened to exterminate our species for the crime of wanting to be free. The view screen behind her showed the burning wreckage of the Dominion fleet. This is our answer. We do not kneel. We do not break. We do not forget. Any species that threatens human lives will learn what the Kethvoran learned today. She paused, and every being in the galaxy held their breath. We are not a Tier 7 civilization. We are humanity. And for 30 years, we have been holding back. Consider this your only warning. Leave us in peace, and we will be the greatest friends you have ever known. Threaten our children, our homes, or our freedom, and we will be the last enemy you ever face. The transmission ended. Silence fell across the galactic concord as trillions of beings processed what they had just witnessed. A species they had dismissed as primitive had just destroyed the most feared military force in the galaxy. The rules had changed. Everything they thought they knew was wrong. On the observation station, Ambassador Lyris Venn sat in stunned silence. She had watched humans for 30 years and never truly understood them. Now, at last, she began to see the truth. Humans were not primitive. They were patient, and their patience had just run out. The years that followed the Battle of New Helsinki would be remembered as the Great Reckoning. News of the Dominion's defeat spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Species that had lived in fear for centuries suddenly found their courage. Worlds that had been conquered generations ago began to whisper of rebellion. The Kethvoran had seemed invincible, but the humans had shattered that illusion forever. The Dominion collapsed within a decade. Without their fleet, without their feared warriors, without the reputation that had kept conquered species obedient, the Kethvoran lost everything. Their subject worlds rose up one by one, casting off chains that had bound them for generations. The empire that had terrorized the galactic fringe for 3,000 years crumbled into dust. Humanity did not claim the fallen territories. They did not seek to build an empire of their own. Instead, they watched as justice unfolded naturally, as the oppressed became free and the oppressors faced the consequences of their cruelty. When asked why they showed such restraint, Admiral Cross simply said, "We did not fight for conquest. We fought for survival." The galaxy can sort out its own problems now. The Galactic Concord held an emergency session to address what they called the human question. For 12,000 years, they had classified species according to power and potential. Tier 1 civilizations were the eldest and most advanced. Tier 7 civilizations were barely worth acknowledging. The system had worked perfectly until a Tier 7 species destroyed a Tier 3 military power in a single afternoon. They must be reclassified, the council president declared. But to what tier? Their technology exceeds anything we have seen. Their military capabilities are unprecedented, and their psychology is completely alien to our understanding. The debate lasted for months. Some argued for Tier 1 status, placing humanity among the eldest races. Others demanded a new category entirely, something that acknowledged humanity's unique nature. A few voices even suggested that the entire classification system should be abolished, since it had clearly failed. In the end, they created something new. Humanity was designated as apex variable, a species whose potential could not be measured because it had no apparent limits. The classification came with a warning: do not provoke humanity under any circumstances. Ambassador Lyris Venn requested permanent assignment to Earth's diplomatic mission. Her superiors granted the request without question, eager to have someone with her experience monitoring this unpredictable species. She moved to a small apartment in Geneva and dedicated herself to understanding humans. She studied their history with growing fascination. She learned of ice ages that had nearly driven them to extinction. She learned of plagues that had killed half their population. She learned of wars that had consumed entire generations. She learned of disasters, famines, and catastrophes beyond counting. And through all of it, humans had survived. Not just survived, but thrived. Every challenge had made them stronger. Every defeat had taught them lessons. Every catastrophe had forged them into something more resilient. 10,000 years of struggle had created a species that simply did not know how to give up. She interviewed veterans of the siege, civilians who had endured months of bombardment, scientists who had worked on Project Prometheus. Every conversation revealed new depths to the human character. They were not stronger than other species. They were not smarter. They were not born with better technology or superior resources. They were simply more stubborn. One evening, Lyris visited Admiral Cross at her retirement home overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The Admiral was old now, her silver hair turned white, her fierce eyes softened by age. But her mind remained sharp, and she welcomed the ambassador with that same unsettling smile. "You have been studying us for a long time," Cross said, pouring tea with steady hands. "Have you figured out our secret yet?" Lyris accepted the cup and considered her words carefully. "I have learned many things about humanity," she said, "but I still do not understand the core of what makes you different. Every other species I have encountered accepts limitations. They know when they are beaten. They understand when to surrender. Humans seem incapable of that recognition." Cross nodded slowly. "You are close to the truth, Ambassador. Let me tell you a story that might help." She gazed out at the ocean, her eyes distant with memory. "When I was young, I studied the history of our world wars. Terrible conflicts that killed millions and destroyed entire nations. I found a quote from one of our leaders, a man named Winston Churchill. During our darkest hour, when everything seemed lost, he said, We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender." The Admiral turned to face Lyris. "That is humanity in a single statement. We do not calculate odds. We do not weigh costs against benefits. When something threatens what we love, we fight. We fight when we are outnumbered. We fight when we are outgunned. We fight when victory seems impossible. Because surrender means losing everything, and we would rather die on our feet than live on our knees." Lyris felt the weight of those words. She finally understood what she had sensed for decades. Humans were not fearless. They felt fear as deeply as any species. But they had learned to transform fear into fuel. They burned their terror and turned it into determination. "Every other species evolved to survive," Cross continued. "Humans evolved to endure. Break our bodies, and we heal. Break our spirits, and we adapt. Back us into a corner, and we become something that corners should fear. Our ancestors faced extinction and won. That defiance is written into every cell of our being." The sun was setting over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Lyris watched the light fade and felt something change inside her. She had spent 300 years as a diplomat, managing conflicts and smoothing tensions. She had thought she understood the universe. She had been wrong. The galaxy had operated on rules of power and hierarchy for 12,000 years. The strong dominated, the weak submitted, and everyone knew their place. But humans rejected those rules. They created their own reality through sheer force of will. And now the galaxy would never be the same. In the centuries that followed, a saying emerged among the spacefaring species. It was whispered by warriors who had seen the recordings of New Helsinki. It was taught to children as a warning. It became a fundamental truth of galactic civilization. There are 3 things no wise species does: challenge the void, defy entropy, and threaten humanity. And on a small blue planet in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy, the descendants of those who had endured ice ages and plagues and wars continued to build, continued to dream, continued to reach for the stars. Not because they were the strongest, not because they were the smartest, but because they refused, absolutely and unconditionally refused, to ever give up. That was humanity. That was their gift to the universe. And no species would ever forget it.